Thinking about buying a Range Rover 4.4 TD V8? Whether it's your dream car or potential headache, I'll hopefully help you make an informed decision and save thousands. Everything you need to know before making your purchase, including common problems and what to watch out for. Let's dive in. So buying a Range Rover 4.4 TD V8 can be an incredible experience, but it also can be a complete nightmare. One of the first things that I would say to look for, and this is a given indicator for me, look at the tyres. Look at the tyres on the car. Look at they spent, £200 a tyre, these up to £270 a tyre. Generally, I tend to look at what tyres people have put on these cars, because if someone's spent £1,000 putting a new set of tyres on there, generally know that person's looked after the car and he's cared for that car, he or she should I say. But if you go in there and you've got 3 mismatched tyres, or you've got cheap budget tyres on there, look if they've put Michelin's, look if they've put Pirelli's on there. Generally these cars come with, or most people would put Pirelli Verdes, which is an all-season tyre. Look at the wear and tear on them as well, especially on the back wheels. Look and see if the tracking's been done. It's another one people don't tend to do. They'll chuck a new set of tyres on there, they mess around with the suspension. These cars have got an incredible amount of technology with regards to the suspension settings up and down, the different levels, and with the adaptive suspension as well on the 2011, 2012. May have had it in the 2010, I'm not sure, I don't think so. Yeah, generally look at the tracking of the wheels themselves, and obviously the steering wheel, make sure it is driving straight. Make sure when you put your brake on, it's not pulling to one side and stuff like that. There's not many garages that can actually do this correctly, and I know that through experience, because I've had my car into garages and they've given it back to me and the steering wheel's off centre and it's pulling to one side, and I don't know how they faked it or not, I don't know, but the sheet that they give you, it just wasn't right. There's only a few people that can do this properly, and they have to have the facilities to be able to put it into tight tolerance, which is where the tolerances on the suspension are a lot less, and they can set it up a bit more perfect. Obviously, taking it into a Range Rover garage, it's going to be a lot more expensive, but in general, you can find garages, normally specialist garages, do this, which are much cheaper. Again, it's definitely one that you should look into, and definitely one, if you've bought that car, you should get it done and get it checked, because you will go through a lot of money in tyres otherwise. Generally look at the actual car itself, just the little things, and that would be my first indicator. It kind of tells me that they can't afford to look after these cars. Like I turned around and said, these were £100,000 car, and they come with bigger bills. They're not going to be as cheap to run as your normal Ford Escort. However, because of that, the car's not changed. You're still sitting in £100,000 car, so you're generally sitting in an armchair with aniline or semi-aniline leather. You've got TV screens, you've got TV screens in the rear. It's opulent. It's an incredible place to be over long distances, and it's incredibly nice. The ride quality of these with the air suspension is fantastic. What are some of those common issues? So the most common problems with the 4.4 TD V8 seem to do with turbocharge failure, with air suspension issues, oil leaks from the engine, transmission, and more commonly from the oil cooler, which is a really extreme one that most people get, down to electrical glitches. Rust is a big one in key areas around the wheel arches, on the jacking points, and generally on the rear arches by the door and stuff like that. Cooling system problems is another one, and down to the very last one, and quite a major one, is the DPF issues, especially if you're running one of these cars for doing short journeys around town, which clearly they weren't meant for. These were meant to cover vast amounts of spaces and times and huge miles, but you can get away with that, and there is ways of doing that, but obviously that's going into another thing, which we will touch on later on in the video. So first one, turbocharger failures. Obviously it's a powerful car, it's a heavy car and pretty economical for how big the engine is, obviously a 4.4 litre. But with these twin turbos, it pushes this thing from 0 to 60 in around about 7.2 seconds, and there is some tuning you can do to enable that to go even quicker, which I have actually done on my car. So its turbochargers can wear out. Mainly this is due to oil starvation, which is obviously ongoing problems. Turbo drain line generally can cause a problem. Not on all of them, I don't know why that is, it just seems to be on some of them. So you'll get an excessive amount pooling in that area. There is a modification, again, search online, there is a modification for that. I've not had to do it, but some people weirdly enough have to. But I just turn around and say, if you're driving these, generally just every so often put your foot down and boot it, but obviously do it in a place where you can, because these cars are pretty fast. Once you're going over 2,500 RPM, you're shifting in one of these cars. I mean, generally driving around, you could be 70 miles an hour on the motorway and your revs will be at 1,500, literally 1,500, maybe less. It's also to do with the oil quality and also the mileage of the car. Although I would turn around and say high mileage cars I wouldn't be scared of, because currently I'm running one that's got 193,000 miles. I do regular oil changes on it, and as long as you keep doing that and you don't get the dilution in the oil. Dilution is where obviously the EGR valve recirculates, and when your car goes into regeneration to clear out the DPF, that dilutes the oil itself and it puts a certain amount of fuel into it that's not burnt off, causing dilution. And therefore when you do your oil change, you'll see it, you'll get a really dirty, like thin, horrible oil, and it's not very clever for your engine. If you start putting anything other than that, like a C3, C4 or any others, you're not going to be able to circulate as quickly through your engine and could cause potential catastrophic engine failures. Symptoms of the turbos going, you'll get a whining sound, a loss of power, and potentially absolute failure, which obviously extremely costly. So yeah, when you're buying one of these cars, I would generally turn around and say, start it up first thing in the morning. Hopefully the engine is not going to warm, or at least tell them you don't want it. You want to see a cold start. Listen to it, see how it performs on first thing. Generally get it up to temperature and take it for a fairly long drive. But part of the way through that drive, obviously make sure you stick your foot down and really push the car and push it past the 2,000 RPM. And at that point, this car is pretty shifting. This allows the secondary turbo to open up. And if there's going to be any faults, you'll probably see it after that, and you'll have a restricted performance. And this is obviously caused by actuators not being able to achieve it, which could be anything. It could be a mechanical failure on the actuator itself, on the secondary turbo. It could also be some rubber hose lines going to it, which obviously is the vacuum is not achieving the correct desired result. There is other problems that cause that. It could also be your manifold is split, which again is a massive cost. So it's all something you want to be looking for. If you see potential oil leaks and stuff like that, the main one coming off of the intercooler off the front is on the right hand side. It tends to split sometimes, and obviously you get blockages throughout that whole system as well. I also seem to think a lot of people, well, it is for my case anyway, every place I've ever been to seems to put or seems to recommend the wrong oil for the car. I know that's mad, but just look in the manual. They do clearly state it's a C1. So, air suspension systems, the big one. These cars are super complicated. For when they were manufactured and they came out, they had so much technology in them. And don't doubt everyone that moans about the Range Rovers and turn around and says that, you know, they're unreliable and stuff like that. No, they're just extremely complicated and they need to be looked after. Remember, you're driving around in a car that probably was once, when it was bought out, over £100,000. So it's never going to be like your Ford Escort or something like that, which was probably only £20,000 when it was new. So yeah, this system is incredibly complicated, and that's why there's more chance of things going wrong. Compressors go on these cars, airlines go on these cars. You need to look up underneath the car and have a look at the expansion chamber, make sure it's not rotted out, make sure the lines are good and you can see them on. So yeah, the airbags can fail after a long period of time. They get brittle, they're up and down, but they do give you a superior ride, especially from the 2011-2012, which has got a more advanced suspension on there. They're more adaptive dynamics, should I say. Yeah, look at that. One of the biggest problems, and I had it actually when I bought my car. So even though they'd had the airbags replaced, clearly the person that did it either didn't have the technology or the plug-in system to be able to set it up correctly. So when I actually bought mine, he did mention to me that he was having problems with the suspension, even though he'd had one of the rear shocks done. Look at the car itself. Look at how it sits. Is it uneven? As long as the car's on a straight, pretty level platform, have a look at the suspension itself. Look at the gap on each side of all the wheels and make sure it's sitting straight. Obviously you can go into the 4x4 settings on the screen as well and check that. Make sure they are all level. If one of them's looking slightly up, that could indicate a problem. Not that it's a major problem. So if you have a diagnostics tool, I would recommend the IID tool, which is pretty much standard that everyone uses. And I would turn around and say 100%, if you can have one of these cars, it will save you thousands, because I believe currently getting a diagnostic is about 120 to 160 pound, and you can do that for free. Obviously they're expensive, but well worth it, well worth it. And I'll do a link to that later on in the video. So if you have one of these diagnostics tools, straight away I found out that my suspension, one of them, was actually sitting about 25mm difference to the rest of them. And funny enough, that's the one that he actually changed. So all I did was went through a calibration setting, and it talks you through it. It shows you how to do it, and you just take measurements from the center of the wheel to the top of the actual wheel arch on every single one. You can adjust it up and down. You can hear the compressor pumping more air into there, and make sure you get it exactly level all the way through. And lo and behold, after I did that, I don't have any problems with the suspension whatsoever. So I probably think there's a lot of them out there that have been messed around with and never actually been set up correctly or properly. Obviously you get a difference with tyres as well, so with regards to 21-inch, 20-inch, 19-inch and stuff like that, there's different settings, but it does guide you through that generally. So oil leaks, generally most part of it, and I think pretty much every single person that's owned one could probably vouch for this, is the oil cooler. Basically the engine gets hot in the V of the engine and the oil cooler warps itself, and the rubber, or gaskets should I say, not right, rubber, the gaskets in the bottom of them tend to let by, and what normally happens, you'll see deposits of oil going into your coolant. On the right hand side of the oil cooler, there is a very tiny section for, and I don't know why it seems to fail on that part of it. It is an expensive fix if you actually take it somewhere else, but it is doable, even DIY doable. I did my own, and I believe at the time it cost me around about £200 plus the bits. So generally get up underneath the car, have a look on the further part of the engine at the back of it, ask them to raise it up onto the highest settings so you can actually get up underneath. And generally just have a look underneath the car if you can see lots of oil, because over a period of time it does drain down through the back and you'll see deposits on there. You might be unlucky, well not unlucky, you might find out that they've actually got the engine cover on there, in which case it's a bit more difficult to actually see that. The other one on the back of the oil cooler itself is an oil line, and the O-rings tend to fail on that, and that's quite an easy one to look at. So you can take the front part of the engine cover off, and if you're lucky with a torch you can look at the back there and see if you can see any oil. If not, you'll have to take the actual airbox section, which is only two nuts, take the rubber off the top, the two nuts on either side, and slide the whole airbox filtration system out, and then you'll be able to obviously dive in there a little bit better and peek around and have a look, see if you can see any oil in that area. And even if you are buying one, I know the bloke whoever or you're buying it off of might turn around and say, oh, it's a bit much mate in it, but trust me, it's something you really do want to do. Obviously it gives you a bit more of a haggle for cost, and obviously if they're trying to hide something and they don't want you to see that, then clearly you know to just walk away. So rust on these cars. There was a stage, and I've been informed recently that between the years of 2007 and 2012, they changed manufacturers for their steel. So, and there seem to be a lot more problems. So the main areas to look for, biggest one is the rear arches. So open up the rear doors, have a look down the arches, down the bottom where the plastic seems to meet, and and you'll probably see signs of bubbling or anything around there. They tend to cake up. Obviously they're 4x4, people use them off-road as well, but even on the road, the general salt, especially in England, they will build up underneath that bottom rail, and they'll get chunks of wet dirt and mud stuck in there, and there is like a little foam insert on the back part of it, and it seems to collect it from that point. It's not a very good idea, but I understand the reasons why they did it. So basically check around there, check the jack-in points. They seem to rust out and rot a lot. There's another good one to look for. And up around the actual arches themselves. Hopefully if you've got someone that's looked after it, they would have protected it, put wax oil in there, or they put sorts of rust treatment, a hammerite or whatever it may be in that area. But generally look both sides for that sort of area, especially if you've got one where they're using the side steps. Generally myself, I don't like the look of side steps. I think they look much cleaner without them. But obviously agricultural look, people tend to like the off-roady look sometimes, and they do like them. I don't see there's any benefit in them at all myself. They tend to cause more problems and rust out and rot and cause a lot of problems. So moving around to the back of the car, generally the front of the car is good. You don't seem to get any problems whatsoever. But the back of the car is the tailgate. Now, a lot of cars do have problems. You'll see it normally left to right side. You'll see it bubbling on the bottom edge. It seems to collect water in these areas. And you need to look really carefully, because lift the actual tailgate up, look up underneath, look around where the lights are for the number plate, and generally run your hand along there, see if it's been repainted, see if there's any bubbling effects or anything like that. But it is a common problem. I got to the point on my one where I wasn't happy with it, and I knew it was only going to get worse. So I actually swapped mine out. I believe it or not, I think I was lucky. I bought a 2007 when it was actually made prior to that, but it was off of a 2007, and I actually looked like it was aluminium. There was absolutely no rust on it whatsoever, and I just got it repainted to the car. Again, I think I was lucky. I bought it for around about £80, and I paid £250 to get it all repainted. And it was generally a fairly easy job to fit it myself. Just watched a few YouTube videos of how people have done it, just re-guiding all the biggest thing was getting all the electrics out of the wiring system, but it is doable. You don't have to cut them, and you can pull them through generally without making any cuts or any problems, and you can push it all the way back in as well. I think there's just a couple of clips you need to be aware of when pulling it through. Yeah, that's definitely one to look for with regards to the tailgate. So regarding electrics, so not telling anyone how to suck eggs, but yeah, go through every single thing. Be that annoying person when you're buying a car. Sit there, go through. If it's got heated and cooled seats, make sure they heat up, make sure that they cool. Although the cooling is not fantastic, but it should work. Make sure the heated windscreen works. Make sure the heated mirrors work. Make sure the mirrors actually adjust themselves. Make sure if they're put into a dip function, which is when you reverse, they automatically dip. Make sure they work. Make sure the windows go down fully and go back up automatically on all of them. Make sure the lock on the rear ones or the lock on the windows so that people can't undo them. Make sure the AC unit works. Make sure you are blowing hot. Make sure it is going cold. Also check in the rear as well. If you've got the fancier ones and you've got heating and cooled and adjustable seats in the rear of the seats, check that as well. Make sure they all work, because you'll regret it otherwise, because it can be very costly if those are the sort of things. And obviously they're very niggling as well. Make sure the memory works on your seat, and if you've got the adjustable steering wheel, make sure all that works, in, out, up, down, and however you want it. Going into the gearbox when you're running the car, so obviously go through all the gears, push it, see what it's like when it changes up smoothly, let it off the accelerator, let it de-accelerate, and see if it goes through the gears smoothly again, going back down to 1, 2, etc. And then try it in sports mode. Do exactly the same in sports mode. Hopefully you'll have a bit of fun at the same time as well, because these cars are pretty quick for the size they are. Puts a smile on my face all the time. And you look at this car, you're sitting in there and you're in your armchair and you're thinking, seriously, this car shouldn't be going this fast, but it does. So yeah, check that. Paddle shifts, check the paddle shifts, make sure they all work as well, smoothly up and down the gears. I don't tend to have a problem, but you never know, you might have that problem. A lot of people don't service the gearbox. I think Range Rover said don't service them. It's definitely one I would turn around and say get serviced. It's a ZF 8-speed gearbox on there. It's used generally across lots and lots of different cars. It is pretty robust, and I think it can take up to somewhere around about the 700 brake horsepower in there, so it's definitely not a problem for this car at all. But you do get some problems, and again, it can be expensive if it needs to be fixed. I have actually serviced mine myself. It is doable. You can go through the manual. There is a massive procedure to do it, but it is generally doable. And funny enough, I actually did it on my drive. I didn't even have anything else. I just raised it up and then put it in extended mode. And look in your manual if you want to know how to do that. So the coolant system, as I said before, try the heating, try the air conditioning unit, make sure everything works correctly, and obviously look underneath the bonnet and look for any pink signs around any of the cooling, the radiators, any of the pipe work. This engine is so complex. It's got so many different parts to it. But get in there with a torch, have a look around, see if you can see any coolant leaks, see if you can see anything on any of them. It normally stains and you'll get like a pink stain because they use the long life stuff in there. Yeah, generally have a look around, make sure you can see that. Obviously, like I said earlier, with regards to the oil cooler, look in the coolant box, open it up, obviously not after you've driven it. Have a look at the coolant, release the pressure off the tank and have a look in there, see if you can see any oil deposits. If you do, it's either had it in the past, but you need to ask that question, or potentially it's on its way out and it will need a new oil cooler soon. So the diesel particulate filter, or the DPF, these cars weren't really meant to, it's a 4.4 TDVA. It wasn't really meant to be running around town, but generally people do use them. They're now getting to the point they're cheap enough to drive around, although albeit £710 is tax is not quite cheap really, and they don't really perform fantastic around town. You can, when I say perform, i.e. the fuel and stuff like that. I mean, generally around town you're looking at probably 16 miles per gallon, less sometimes depending where you're going on them. But on long runs these can achieve like 32, 33, up to 35 miles per gallon, which is fantastic for a car that's like 2,800 kilos and 4.4 diesel lump basically. See if there's any warning signs with regards to the DPF. You'll get a restricted performance, you'll get smoke coming out of the back of them, you get funny smells and stuff like that. But the main one is obviously you'll get an amber warning come up on your screen, DPF full. At this point you know something's wrong, it's full, it's not regenerating. Most of the problems that are caused by that are either run around town, so the car never gets up to temperature and it never does a regen, which is where it burns off the excess soot in the DPF, which is something obviously it needs to get to a certain temperature to do that. Normally the engine needs to be around above 70 degrees, and it will just add a lot more fuel into the system and heat the engine up, and I believe it goes to somewhere around 500 degrees, and it just burns off the soot in the DPF. Like I said, you'll get an amber warning come up. At that point you need to really if you haven't got the IID tool, which you can actually manually do a forced regen and then go for I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes drive, and it will force itself to do that. Or you're going to have to take it to the garage, which is quite expensive to be able to do that, and they'll do it for you. But like I said, get the IID tool, it'll make a huge difference in your life. But yeah, generally these are meant for long runs. They're not meant for like run around town. They're meant to cover huge amounts of mileage. On one of my other videos I've literally just gone from Ukraine to England and back, so 2,830 miles without any problems. Just a windscreen wiper came off and low washer fluid. So although these cars, people do turn around and say that they're the world's worst cars, oh, don't get a Range Rover and stuff like that, it can be true, but I'm hopefully going to teach you the common faults to look for. So with regards to the EGR and the DPF, there is things you can do to get over that. There's now companies there, although a lot don't advertise them, but there is things you can do. You can, software wise, block off the EGRs, so it's not regurgitating its own shit, should I say. But if you're going to do that, and again I know this through experience, you need to do the DPF as well. Now obviously in England that's frowned upon. You shouldn't be doing that, so I wouldn't say that's the thing you should do. However, if you do want to do that, I can confirm that yes, it is a fantastic mod. You'll never get the DPF full, you never get the warnings. Basically they just remove all the internals out of there and you'll never know the difference. With regards to these cars, on the MOT status, as far as I'm aware, they're not allowed to touch or anything like that, and they would never know the difference. And the settings that are on their machine with regards to these cars passing, obviously they're older cars now and there are different restrictions on there. So generally these cars, even with the EGRs blocked off and the DPF, they still will pass. I know from experience mine's passed, and also I know the fact that if you look at the sheets that they supply prior to that, it doesn't even register. In fact, I've had 3 now on there where the MOTs doesn't even register on the machine because the results are so low, because generally they did a good job with the EGR and stuff like that. However, it doesn't help the engine. I will turn around and say that. Also, you do get problems with the sensors. There's a notorious one on the left hand side, the exhaust temperature sensor, and if that doesn't register the correct temperature sensor, it won't start the regen, which is another reason why people have a lot of problems with the DPF, as the car doesn't regen on its own and you end up having to do a forced regen. So just generally, when you looking at a car, ask the person if they have had any problem with regards to the DPF regen or any errors that have come up. Hopefully they'll be honest with you and you'll get a good buy. So for keeping an eye out on some of these problem comms that I've gone through, hopefully you're going to save yourself fortunes and you can enjoy this legendary SUV, because it is a very, very capable car. Most people just drive them around town, to be honest, and you know, they're just meant to be enjoyed and meant to cover vast distances, and they make for a fantastic family car. I've hoped you'd enjoyed this video and I look forward to doing some more. If there's any comments or anything you want me to do next time on a video, obviously leave it in the comments down below. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe, because I want to get this channel moving forward. Maybe some other cars, maybe you want to look around my car and bring more of the actual car in itself. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and we'll see you next time. So when you're taking this car for a drive, as I said earlier, put your foot down, boot it. Get the secondary turbo to kick in, which generally kicks in after 2,000 to 2,500 RPM. If you do get a puff of smoke coming out the back, I don't think it's generally much to worry about unless it's excessive and it continues, but it's normally literally just where there's oil in the pipeline and it's just pulled it through and puffed it out the back. So wheels and tyres. Generally, most people put Pirellis on these. I've actually swapped mine out only because of my location and where I am. I didn't believe the Pirellis were that good in the snow and ice and stuff like that. So I actually changed mine for Michelin Defender LTX, which are, for me, a much better tyre. Generally, I think in England, the Pirellis Scorpion Verde, not the Zeros, I think they're rubbish in the wet, or I believe they're rubbish in the wet. A lot of people have commented on that. And definitely the PCNS ones, which are the quieter ones, they've got foam on the inside of them. They generally tend to be pretty good, but they just wear out very quick as well. Obviously quite expensive to replace. And they're soft as well. That's another reason why I didn't get them here. The roads tend to be not that clever here, so I ended up getting stones, or sharp stones, actually going through the tyre. So originally I had 21-inch tyres on there. The person before changed them over. And one thing I would turn around and say, if you have got 21s, if you do go and get an IID tool, make sure you towel your car. Go into the car actual settings on there and download it from your car and change it to make sure you have got the rolling road and you've got the tyre size and everything put in there correctly. It will help with regards to your fueling, and obviously your speedo as well will be reading correctly, and you can adjust that as well with regards to percentages, which give you a better overall view of how well your car's doing. 21s look great, don't get me wrong, they are fantastic. Make sure you've got proper Range Rover, Land Rover wheels on there. The reason I say that, because if not, they will crack. It's not a case they might, they will. This car weighs an incredible amount. As soon as you hit a big rut in the road, which generally you will in England and anywhere else as well, will split the rim, and you may find that you'll have repairs. So one, look for repairs on the inside, get your torch in there, look in the inside of the wheel and see if you can see any welded repairs on there. Hopefully you haven't got any, but I would turn around and say, for me personally, I do like the 21s. They do look good. I have still got a set in the garage, which I'm selling out here. and they were off of the L405. Generally, I swapped back over to another set of L405 wheels. Some people like them, some people don't, but I went back down to the 20-inch rims, and I actually put a 55 tyre width on there, which brought them back up to the same size wheel, so they still look good on the car. But because of the extra side wall I've got, for me anyway, it's incredibly soft, comfortable ride. And I think there's a huge difference between the 20s and the 21s. Possibly if you're taking your car off-road, then they'll probably go down to 19s, but that depends on what car you've got. The big Brembo brakes, I believe, you can't have those. So obviously check before they can actually fit. So the internal dimensions on them. But generally I would turn around and say stick with 20s. That's my personal preference. If you want that gangstery look, go for the 21s and stuff like that. But you can still get that look. My car's all blacked out completely. I like that look. It gives me a cleaner look, and I'm sticking to the 20s. I just think it gives a much softer, better, comfortable ride. So mudguards, when we're now on the subject about talking about wheels, mudguards, generally I would say put them on there. I think it makes the car look nicer. Myself, that's generally my opinion. Obviously other people have got a different opinion, but I would turn around and say in the English roads, rain, slush, mud, and the salt they put on the roads. Obviously these cars suffer with regards to salt on the roads. This is why I spoke about earlier about the rust and things to look for. But I would generally turn around and say if you haven't got them, personally I would say fit them. They're not expensive. You can get them off eBay or places like that. And yeah, they're fairly easy to fit, just self-tapping screws go in there. Generally I think they do make the car look better, and they will stop flicking mud all up the back and generally all over the car. So the sound systems on these cars, they're generally pretty good. Harman Kardon Logic 7, I believe you can get the HD one as well on those. I generally find they're a pretty good system. You do get rattling, you need to check whilst you're going through it, check balance on there, go into the settings, bottom left, and then look at the settings on there, do the balance whilst it's playing something, do the balance left to right, back to forward, just make sure every single speaker's working, it should sound that it is sounding. And obviously you're getting a good bass as well. You can go in there and up the bass on there, make sure you get that good setting. But generally, yeah, they're pretty good sound system. The navigation system, I would turn around and say, is probably pants. Sounds lovely. The voice on there is fantastic. Sounds very, very posh. But it generally doesn't work. No matter how many times you try and talk to it and ask it to do something, it's pretty rubbish. So yeah, one of my other videos, I've actually shown how to fit a dash cam and a 10-inch screen with a dash cam and a navigation system. So basically it connects up to your phone. And I've shown it so you can actually put the cable in and completely hidden in there and you can hardly see it. And for me, it's a brilliant addition. Connect up to your phone, whether it's Android or Apple CarPlay. Yeah, very, 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 very good system, and a much better. So these cars, they do have Bluetooth and you can take phone calls, which is incredibly good. However, they don't do music streaming, but you can get, and I will put a link in the description, you can get a very little tiny plug-in USB, and all it does is basically you tune into your radio and it will attach to that and you can stream music through it. However, like I've just turned around and said earlier, if you are having the dash cam fitted, or you do want to fit that, and generally I think it's the better way to go, it gives a neater look, and you can also stream music on those as well. So basically it's got its own FM tuner and you just tune your radio into that station and leave it on that, and you can play your stuff through that, but obviously plays out through the actual car stereo itself. So the lights on these cars, yeah, they're pretty good. And they're adaptive. If you've got the cornering ones, they're pretty good as well. When you go around corners, they'll put the side lights on, they'll light up the side of the road, and they do actually light up pretty good. In snowy conditions, you can put your lower fog lights or spots or lower fog lights on, and it does an incredible job of lighting up the road. But generally you get problems with regards to yellowing. Obviously they take a big hit on the roads. If you're traveling long distances, you will find them yellowing, or you will find scratched and pitted on the front. You can use pastes, you can buy them online, and you can use it yourself and just get a buffer and get them buffed out, and they do a pretty darn good of getting them back up to a good standard. But with regards to driving these abroad, there's another good thing you can actually do on these. If you look, generally check in your manual, or if you haven't got one, look online. It's quite difficult to find, but there is a little tiny lever on these lights, and basically where you've got your in England you've got the beam which shines off to one side, so basically you can flick this lever down and it flattens the beam out. So basically you can drive them abroad and you don't have to change your lights or anything, and it gives you a more flatter line beam. And obviously while you're doing that, put it in a garage or up against a wall and test it. Flick it over. Don't do it while the light's on. There's an incredible amount of power going through to these lights, and I would yeah, don't touch it. Definitely do it while the lights are off and then try it after and then flick it back on. It's literally just a plastic cover you can pull off, a big round plastic cover, and if you look, you can look inside there. Look online though, because like I turned around and said, it's really difficult to find the actual little plastic bit itself, but once you do, it's generally easy to do. If there's any comments or anything you want me to do next time on a video, obviously leave it in the comments down below. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.